Great panel. Amazing panel. People just joined from Stockholm, London. Frank, where you came from just now?
Bonn.
From Bonn.
Vom Rheinland.
From Bonn, Rhineland. Nathan. Nathan actually is Nathan Benaich. Nathan is French. And let me introduce, Susan just said we have to connect, and let me introduce a little bit our panelists here, because it is a great panel actually, that you know who's in front of you. So Nathan is the founder of Research and Applied AI Summit in London, and of London AI. You are also a venture partner with Point9. You are actually you hold actually a PhD in experimental and computational cancer from University of Cambridge, and you are based in London. So on Nathan's right side, we have Itxaso. Itxaso is working with M12. So M12 is for those who do not know, because actually it's a quite recent structure, it is the venture arm of Microsoft. Itxaso is in charge of European investments, has a long track actually in investing in companies, started actually her career in early stage investing with EC1 Capital, later went to growth investing with Lair Partners, and today is with M12. You have also a PhD, actually, I learned, and you focus on economics and venture capital, and you're also lecturing quite often, actually, entrepreneurship in institutions like Imperial College and University College of London. Then we have Ashley Lundström from Equity Partners. Equity Ventures is actually a venture fund working out of Stockholm. They have teams in Stockholm, in London, but also actually a partner here in Berlin. You are basically investing across mainly Germany and the Nordics. I've learned that you have also investments in France, for example. And you are originally a chemist, and very interested in technologies creating efficiency gains, especially within the healthcare area and also industry. On Ashley's right side, we have Frank Thelen. Frank is the CEO of Freigeist Capital, and in particular, Frank is actually a serial entrepreneur. Still convinced that he's a geek, supporting entrepreneurs and great technology companies. I think you have been invested in Six Wunderkinder, which was acquired actually by Microsoft. You supported MyTaxi. Currently, you are very engaged in Lilium, which is the future of mobility, urban mobility, so the flying car. You have been awarded actually by the Microsoft Innovate for Society Award by Chancellor Merkel quite recently. You are also part of a primetime TV show called Die Höhle der Löwen here in Germany, so which is basically German's Shark Tank. Okay, so it's not a copycat, it's one family. And recently you actually initiated the launch of the so-called Innovation Council, which is supporting Germany's government actually on taking directions and right decisions toward actually building great companies. On Frank's right side, we have Boxun. Boxun Chang, you are actually doing business. So you work with Go Euro, you're the lead scientist, data scientist. In Go Euro, you're based here in Berlin. You have also a PhD in computer science. You started to study in Beijing at the Beijing Institute of Technology. You came for your master's first to Sweden, After your master's, you went to the Netherlands actually to pursue in Delft your PhD. Started to work with Spotify as a data scientist, and now here in Go Euro. So thank you being here. I think we're gonna have 15 minutes now, great discussion on doing and transforming business with AI in Europe. Bushin, so you are from China. Normally everybody says today that great talent from Europe is going to China and actually starting business also out of China. We just learned that 10 years ago you came to Europe to actually pursue your career. Why did you come to Europe?
So 10 years ago when I came to Europe, I came here for studying. And back then when I look at my field, distributed systems, I would say Europe and US were definitely in a much better position compared to China. And also for machine learning, data science, well, data science didn't exist back then, but machine learning, data mining, artificial intelligence, China was not really on the radar back then. So that was very much a decision for studying, the better technology, better knowledge. And when I look at now, so 10 years later or a decade later, lots of things have changed. So China is is definitely one of the fastest rising power in terms of AI and the tech scene in general. And at the same time, universities are catching up very quickly with the help from the industry and also the government. So I would say nowadays, I totally agree with you. There are lots of people going to China. And I also know that when it comes to the choice of studying, lots of students actually choose to stay within China instead of going to the US or Europe. And because they know that the educational system is so well connected to the industry, which is also on the very much cutting edge of the field.
So today, as of today, if you just would graduate, do in your bachelor degree in Beijing, would you still come to Europe or would you think to stay in China?
So I would say it's a 50-50 decision. So I would say my rational side will tell me to stay in China because just to reduce the overhead of keeping up to the cutting edge technology. But my curiosity side probably will push me to Europe or US, just to see the other side. Because I do believe in Europe, in US, also in China, the way companies or people see technology or developing technology are still quite different.
In what perspective are they still quite different?
So when I think about Chinese companies, I think they're much more aggressive in a way, compared to European companies for pushing for new technologies, for pushing more risky projects. They're much less afraid of failing things. And also, there are lots of support from the government as well. The government actually is building lots of policies, regulations, helping companies to take risk. And the execution from the government side is very, very strong compared to Europe, even compared to US.
Okay, so it's what we perceive here in Europe as the top-down actually impulse strategy in China. Frank, when you listen to that and when you listen actually to the fact that China is pushing so much effort actually in making great things in China, what is it what you think we should do here in Europe, starting with Germany maybe, to stay on a competitive level?
Well, first of all, we have to reflect that we're not on a competitive level at all. So we have in the US, we have everybody knows the GAFAs, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, where when you look at the platform, they're really leading, and basically our businesses, when it comes to AWS or other services or logistics, e-commerce, cannot live without these players. And also, when you look at the consumer side, you cannot live without Facebook, Instagram, whatever. So we're really bound into these GAFA ecosystems, and they totally have us. China closed down the walls, so now they have Tencent and Alibaba, which was, when you're reflecting it, a smart move. I believe it was a bad move. I like open ecosystems, but at least China had a strategy, and that was they will not come in here, and we will build our own champions, and it worked super well for them. So Europe has no strategy at all, and we don't see that. It is so critical important to build these platforms that you have the worldwide leading platform in some field where you own the market, you give the rules. And the only thing that we have built is Spotify that kind of owns music. It's not where Apple is or Facebook, but it kind of owns music. But beside from that, we missed out in building platforms. And the things will just accelerate. I mean, those global players that own a technology and a platform will get just more and more powerful. So it's critical for me that we build out of Europe 2 or 3 of these platforms. We have AI, what we talked today. We have 3D printing. We have blockchain. We have quantum computing. We have many new industries coming up where we have, luckily, the opportunity to build a worldwide champion owning a space. But I don't see the push, and maybe the panic is the wrong word, in politicians, in investors, in founders to say, shit, we really have to make this happen. And that's what I try to generate, some positive panic and just make things happen. What we're trying to do with Lilium Aviation, where also is a new industry coming up, and where basically we will change travel. And the first thing that people do in Germany is laugh about Flugtaxis. Even some founders, some CEOs here in Berlin writes publicly tweets about, haha, who needs a Flugtaxi? And that's the DNA we have right now, and we need to change that and see that if new technologies come along, we have to build global champions in Europe.
Great, global champions in Europe. A lot of people are actually reflecting about what Emmanuel Macron, the French president, recently announced about AI for humanity, about the strategy he presented for AI. I can say now a little bit, I'm half French actually, so in terms of with a clink of my eye, I perceive in the strategy of Emmanuel Macron, it's actually a pretty French-driven strategy, yeah? And he says we want to build actually champions in France, out of France. When I listen from what's going on here in German politics, and what we can read in the newspapers is that we build institutes which are supporting teams and projects, a lot about research out of Germany only. Do you think it's really by doing like every country its own turf that we enable really to build European champions?
I would like to go with Europe. I believe we're not playing the Europe card well. And we're pretty much separated, as you just said, with France and Germany. So what I'm trying to do is then work with Germany. But I would like to do it on a European level, but it's even harder to get the same power and effectiveness with all the downsides of the Chinese government. They are pretty much effective. So they make a decision, they go and they just build the airport. They just say, here are 10 billion for AI, or maybe even more, I don't know. It's always insane if you look at a German or European initiative. So we need a government. I would like to be a European initiative that have the guts to invest in these new things. And right now I'm working with the German government, but I would like to see it out of Europe, but I don't see it happen.
Okay, to build those European champions and think about how they can be competitive. Once often says in Europe we should have a so-called third way. Yeah? On one side you have the Chinese, top-down, not very democratic. On the other side, you have the Silicon Valley big companies, and we think about or it's discussed, and actually that is what has been discussed recently also in Germany in the coalition contract. It's also what the French are promoting, is saying we have to more focus on values, on ethics. Here you are 3 investors, and Ashley, when it comes to ethics, you think that it's really possible to make out of values, ethics, a real driver for differentiation and competitiveness? And if yes, how?
First answer, yes, I do think so, and I think that that will come from first and foremost decision makers across the board, from a government perspective to a large corporation perspective to a smaller startup corporation. If everyone understands AI, and I would argue that that's probably the biggest problem society has today, it's too scary right now, no one understands it, and what you don't understand is scary. If everyone understands AI, then everyone will understand both the threat that comes from it and the wonderful power that can come from it, and the way that we should move forward in an ethical way to make sure that it's doing the best for mankind. So if everyone is understanding AI, then I think that we can make very, very rational, ethical decisions for society. I think the risk of not making ethical decisions for society comes from a lack of understanding. So if just small individual companies are acting in their own best interests, we get sub-optimizations that don't potentially align with what's best for society, or maybe potentially unethical.
So when you say if everybody, young and old, understands AI, first we think about, okay, there's education. Education starts early. We quite often, we discuss to say how we bring digital technology already at what age to kids. What is needed actually from your perspective to actually really make AI understandable to kids?
I'm going to answer a different question and say that I'm not worried about the kids. The kids are already running circles around us. I'm worried about those of us who are in our 30s and 40s and 50s. Education starts young, but it shouldn't stop. And I think that everyone has a great responsibility to understand technology over the course of their lifetime, as professionals in their jobs, as individuals in their careers, and as citizens of the world. I think that education needs to be something that is pushed much more just from a kid perspective and from a societal perspective.
Okay.
Sorry, one important part. Me as a German guy, in Germany, I don't know what's going on in Sweden and the US. In Germany, we have a huge problem. We're still learning Latin. And when I talk to many of the politicians and say, sorry, we have to stop this insane, it makes no sense. We have to put in coding, and I don't care if it's Java, Swift, C++, whatever, but learn to code, learn how these strange machines work. I get still a lot of pushback and say, sorry, it's still very important that our kids in Germany learn Latin. And we have to change very much the school system, because also the kids, now they come with an Abitur, which is the highest grade in Germany, and they don't know what code is. They go from elite universities like the WHU, and they never have written a single line of code from one of the most prestigious universities in Europe. So I can only talk for Europe. I don't know, when in the US maybe they do it better. In Europe, it's a big disaster. Education for small kids and also the universities, we have to change it dramatically. It's a huge problem.
Okay, Microsoft. When you listen to that, you say, we listen to Boshin, who's working today here in a European-based company, fighting to attract talent here, I believe, right? What is it what makes for you actually those teams, those companies so attractive to work with? When do you invest, and what is it really on the long track you're looking for?
Yeah, so obviously, Microsoft has its own products and platforms, and they do commercialize those. And you will think, are you going to invest in companies which are competing with some of your products? So that can happen. We don't have the best products, the best capabilities. Our customers, as in many verticals, they are looking for advanced capabilities on those, and our products are very generic. So if you want to get to insurance specifically and help those companies on their workflow, or you want to get to, hospitals, education, and so on, you need specific solutions for those, and we don't have them, right? So Microsoft still has a long way to go to serve the best products to the customers. Ourselves, our investments are completely separate from the motherhood. Let's say the decision-making process happens totally independently, which means that myself, I've been 6-7 years investing, but none of the investors in my team have a Microsoft background. So many companies come to me and they talk to me about products Microsoft has, and I don't even know them, right? Which is absolutely fine. So we are looking basically for cutting-edge technologies, the best people behind them, building those products. We are not going to be able to build those products internally. Microsoft has this idea of, okay, let's partner with companies which can do those things better than we do. We are not going to build an autonomous vehicle ourselves. We are partnering with companies. We are not going to start building blockchain. We will be partnering with the ecosystem. And that's the way we go out there and we find companies and we bring them in. And even if I don't invest, I help a lot of companies getting connected internally, a lot.
Do you provide also data for the companies you are working with then, for startups?
Which sort of data do you mean?
Data from the traditional Microsoft environment, from the client base.
So basically, we do the investment process is totally separate. When we invest in the companies, we have 10 portfolio development people, apart from the investors, and those portfolio development people work for Microsoft between 5 and 10 years. So they know Microsoft well, and they help the companies navigate Microsoft to take advantage of it. And those portfolio development people can help the companies in the portfolio getting connected to the right people. I don't have the data, but if I get you connected to the person who is running sales on insurance or in automotive in Germany, then they can tell you all the data, they can take you to the customers, and that's the way we are working with the company, so we can help them in that way. I don't have a database where I can search for those things.
Great, so you're somehow also referring to your Microsoft ecosystem, what Frank said when it comes to actually work about this, caring about ecosystem. Nathan, you are running the Research Applied AI Summit in London, which is basically the objective to speed up research to market, right? What is it what you can see out of experience in this very specific platform and ecosystem? What is it today in terms of speed to market and cooperation with industry? What works well, and where is it you would say, hey, this is really the push you would need?
Well, I think there's immense willingness and drive amongst entrepreneurs to be building companies using machine learning. We, over the last 5 years, have seen a huge uptick in the number of students who want to engage. I think this year we had 400 students who applied to attend, and 70% of them have some form of advanced degree. So they either want to start a company or join a business. I think like the big decision factor, though, for many of these students is why would they not go work at DeepMind or an equivalent company? And I can totally understand, the sort of decision-making framework there. And I think that's like probably one of the most tough decisions that people have to make nowadays. In terms of like the good parts is certainly I have exposure to the UK scene in London and the university ecosystem there. Many of these master's and PhD programs will have a certain period of time over which the student will engage on a project with the corporate. And significantly, you see exposure from Microsoft, from Apple, Amazon, and also startups that will go pitch their projects to students, which is a fantastic way for those students to get like real-world software engineering and applied research experience. So I think that's really important, and I think not enough companies actually take advantage of that. It's also a good way for startups to get exposure and try and compete against the bigger companies. But inevitably what happens is, like, as a startup, how do you end up offering packages that can compete with larger technology companies that are increasingly kind of building environments that replicate the university lab that many of these students came from. And so to that end, I think actually, government and policymakers should put more of a support structure around new companies and new startups to actually allow them to pay people properly, allow them to strike up collaborations with universities, and make sure that we don't have this environment where, as a talented student, you basically choose amongst 4 companies, and then if for some reason you don't want to do that, then you can choose a startup. But I think that dynamic is kind of unfair at the moment.
So focus really on creating, supporting startups. The idea on building, educating people, building talent, and having the right here in Europe now, reflecting to what you said, Frank, earlier, we need to have a kind of partnered approach across Europe to have actually a kind of leverage, maybe in terms also of financing. I would like, because now we had a quick reflection and we started a little bit late, but I would like to give actually the chance here to the audience also to ask questions to our panelists concerning that issue of how to do and transform business with AI for last 5 minutes.
Hello. Hi, hello. I'm Itxaso from Accenture Interactive, from the gamification chapter. I have a question basically for you, Mr. Frank. Do you think that, like changing the education system, it can be a little bit more of changing the startup ecosystem too? Because I've been also within the startup ecosystem, and what I learned from there is the young talented people were starting the startups in the first place like, we're going to change the world. Now they're all going like, okay, we have an idea and we're going to sell this as quick as possible and exit. So as a matter of fact, because of this motivation, when they're coming up with an idea that can really make a difference about AI or about other stuff, a big company is coming up and offering a good amount of money and they're selling it. And at the end of the day, due to all the terms and conditions and regulations, the main core idea is going under the carpet. So it's not getting bigger, it's not getting more wider, that it has the potential. So maybe, I don't know, maybe a kind of a differentiating from the startup perspective can be necessary. What do you think about that? Thank you.
First of all, I also reflect that we started with founders who had just a product and wanted to build it, and they don't even knew that there was an exit or something. I started my first company without even knowing that there's something like venture capital. And today you go, you meet a lot of people that say, hey, that's great, the market is so big, and I will sell it to Microsoft for 250 million, and they don't even have a user. So this is really bad, and it's good that we have more founders, but we need founders that create companies because of an internal desire to just create that product. School systems are totally different. They're run by the government for a good reason. And the problem is the government has to change that. So there's nobody steering really besides politicians, which is how it is, and I believe it's okay. But the politicians have to understand that they need to make changes now, because when they go to their first job, they need to understand, for example, coding, AI, or whatever, and today they're still teaching stuff that is 100 years old. And that's something the government has to change. And the problem is, even if the German government would change that, that's ridiculous in Germany, you have then something called Berlin, Bayern, NRW, and so on, so they're smaller, and they have the power to change their schools. So it's a federalismus system. it's insane. I would directly get rid of it, have one thing like in China who can tell at least with the schooling system what's happening. So it's a very, very bad situation. I'm trying my best and push it, but it's hard.
Can I add to that real quick? That's fantastic, and that's so needed. I think from the startup community, what we as investors have a responsibility to do, and I think we are doing more and more, is pushing these fantastic founders to not sell too early, to support them with capital, with experience, with guts, to build their dreams, which they have. I don't know about you, but I meet companies all across Europe who have a lot of passion and a vision. And I think that we as investors have a responsibility to support that. And you guys out there that are founders, I think that you should push your investors or your potential investors to also back you on building what you want to build instead of letting you sell early.
So we take 2 more questions and then we stop.
We're actually going to take one last question.
I'm against what Frank was saying. You know, we need more generalists. Just to give you an example, a Silicon Valley company is coming to Berlin, to Europe. And do you know why? Because in the US, they are too narrow-minded. And here they are more open. It's completely different things. So I cannot accept, coding. Everybody is saying the data scientist is a job of the 21st century. In 10 years, we have only maybe 10% of the data scientists. We don't need them anymore. What we need in education is a more broader education, not a narrow mind, for all this problem which we have discussed on ethics. Okay, we can discuss it later, sorry.
No. Sorry, I have to answer this. Your applause, and you know what? I applaud you too. Because I'm 100% with you. We need a broader education. The problem is that today we don't teach them how a computer or coding works, but we do other stuff. So I want to have not a deep dive. I don't want to get coding experts, but I want that they understand physics, how the world works, politics, maybe history, coding, AI, because in the end nobody knows in 10 years with all the disruption that's around the corner, we don't know what people will do. And the most important things that people need is a purpose in life, so they know why they stand up every morning, and they need a broader understanding why they're here and what they're doing. So I'm totally for a broader education, but today this important part of our world, we get digitized, there is code, there are machines, is not taught at all. And I want to put it on the agenda besides physics, mathematics, politics, and so on. I believe that's a fair point, right? Because just...
So exciting. You see, it's starting now to have really good discussions. 20, 25 minutes is short. So I would invite everybody to approach our panelists actually later in the break. I think you stay a little bit here in the afternoon as well to continue your discussions. Thank you, Boshun, Frank, Ashley, Itxaso, and Nathan. And I hope that we will succeed in actually building those great companies.